A very warm welcome to all of you. It gives me immense pleasure to have you join us for this special session on integrated business solutions organized by Board of Studies Academic. The integrated business solution paper is not merely a compilation of questions.
Recording in
For
progress.
instance, a company might choose backward integration by acquiring suppliers like plantation companies or forward integration by entering into retail space. Suppose the company opts for backward integration and acquires plantation estate in a neighboring country due to lower cost. This strategic decision must align with FEMA regulations. As per FEMA, any investment exceeding 400% of net worth of an Indian company requires prior approval from RBI. Once this is sorted, the next challenge is financial, whether to fund the acquisition through debt or equity. If debt is preferred, the company must then decide between fixed or fluctuating. In an inflationary scenario, floating rate debt may pose significant risk, and a swap to fixed interest could be considered. Further, if the company ventures into blended tea, it must be mindful that it does not qualify as agriculture produce, which means loading charges on blending tea won't be eligible for exemption under GST. Students, ये आपको यहाँ पर जो एक छोटा सा टी कंपनी का एक सिनेरियो के थ्रू समझाने का जो ये पर्पस है, सिर्फ ये है कि किस तरीके से एक स्ट्रेटेजिक डिसीजन के साथ हमारा फाइनेंस, हमारा फेमा रेगुलेशंस, हमारा टैक्स कंप्लायंसेस कनेक्ट हुआ है. अगर एक मार्केट सैचुरेटेड है तो उस सिचुएशन में हमें अपनी एग्जिस्टिंग सप्लाई चेन के अंदर ही स्ट्रेटेजिक डिसीजन लेना होगा, आइदर बैकवर्ड इंटीग्रेशन और फॉरवर्ड इंटीग्रेशन. अगर बैकवर्ड में जाते हैं और हम ये डिसीजन लेते हैं कि हम अपना नेबर कंट्री के अंदर कुछ इन्वेस्टमेंट करें या कुछ सप्लायर को का एक्विजिशन करें, तो इस सिचुएशन के अंदर जो फेमा के जो रेगुलेशंस हैं वो एक्टिव हो जाते हैं, यानी कि वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, वो आपको कंसिडर करने होंगे. अगर फेमा रेगुलेशन ओके होते हैं तो इसके बाद आपको जो फाइनेंस डिसीजन है उसके ऊपर जाना होगा कि डेट फाइनेंस करना है, इक्विटी करना है, फिक्स्ड करना है, फ्लक्चुएटिंग करना है. यानी कि एक एस्पेक्ट से दूसरा एस्पेक्ट कनेक्टेड है, लेकिन सभी जो रूल्स रेगुलेशन फ्रेमवर्क हैं सारे स्ट्रेटेजिक डिसीजन के बेस पर मूव हो रहे हैं. तो इसलिए ये देखना बहुत जरूरी है कि किसी कंपनी का मिशन विजन क्या है. Therefore, it is very, very important to consider the company's mission, vision, and objectives. Therefore, the key takeaway is that while drafting solution, it is essential to think from the perspective of CEO, balancing strategic, financial, and regulatory factors. Today's session will be guided by CA Bala Subramanian sir, an experienced management consultant with expertise in project feasibility studies, mergers and acquisition, and internal audits. His strategic insights into corporate structuring and project assessment have empowered many businesses to make informed and growth oriented decisions. Today, he will talk through two case studies. First, GreenHarvest Tea Estate Private Limited, a leading tea producer grappling with rising input cost and inefficiencies. The case focus on cost rationalization and efficiency review. And second is P Care Products, a major FMCG player in personal care operating across urban and rural markets. The case highlights regulatory and compliance risk post the Andhra Telangana split and explores the strategy to bridge performance and cost control gaps along with GST compliances. For your convenience, the case materials have already been uploaded on the portal. As we progress through the session, you are encouraged to actively participate. You may raise any technical queries related to case studies during the session, either by unmuting yourself or by typing them in chat box. You may discuss with us in Hindi as well. However, any general queries not specific to case content will be taken up during last 15 minutes of the session, which we have set aside for open discussion and clarifications. With that, let us begin this engaging session. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much. And let me first share the screen so that we could start on the session. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. There is one information for student. There is one information to students to join CA Final WhatsApp group. We have shared the link in chat box. You may ask any query related to your studies from BOS, and BOS will surely help you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. That's a great thing. Yeah, very nice to hear that. Unfortunately, I think in our time we didn't have WhatsApp groups to help us. Very good. Very nice effort. Okay. So, good evening to you all. Without much ado, let me get on to the case study we're going to see. As he was mentioning, we are going to first look at the case study of GreenHarvest tea, right? This is focusing on operational turnaround. What I want to tell you is the two case studies you are seeing today, both are from actually what has happened. Of course, the company, everything has been masked so that it becomes general. But these are based on actual practical cases which we have handled. So it's from that perspective, it gives you a flavor of how it is all integrated viewpoint we need to have, cutting across all the various requirements of strategic financial management aspects, cost aspects, various governance and compliance aspects, etc. Right? How these have to be seen in totality. Yeah, so let's go into the case. So basically, this is a case where GreenHarvest Estates, let's assume it was in Sri Lanka, is a tea producer with operations across multiple zones. So there are highlands, there are lowlands where tea is grown in Sri Lanka. So and this was having tea plantations across in multiple zones. It was facing rising input costs like every plantation was. Actually, all the plantations have been going through this issue. So rising input costs, declining margins, and field inefficiencies launched a comprehensive cost rationalization efficiency review. This was the background to the whole this thing. The focus was purely on the operations, what plucking practices were there. I will also talk about what it is, irrigation and field to factory linkages, the gas which was used in the CTC plants, which is the manufacturing factories, which also we'll talk about in more detail, manpower and logistics efficiency. All this was the focus, right? Core operations. Nothing to do with accounting and all that. Essentially, it's about core operations which were focused. So what was the whole idea? To align cost structure with yield efficiency and improve governance across the estates so that they can get better results. So the review was covering estates in clusters because there are, as I told you, they had estates in different zones. So these were looked at in each cluster. Why it was being looked at? Because of huge gaps and the management style and the people who are managing and all. There could be structural gaps. There could be best practices in one place or the other, which can be replicated across. So many times, what one branch or one unit is doing is not so well known that the same benefits are being taken in all the other places. And this could lead to better cost control. This case specifically highlights Sri Lanka's traditional tea model and how it needs to adapt to the modern challenges through data-driven decisions, better factory utilization, and compliance controls. See, historically, how it was cannot work in current context, so we need to evolve. So I will deal with that in more detail when we look at specific areas where improvements were being chosen. The whole business model was a vertically integrated model. There is a plantation, there is a processing factory, and then it is dispatched. The tea is dispatched. Of course, they were not doing blending, packing, and sale of packeted tea. They were selling bulk. As I mentioned earlier, they had plantations in high regions, that is hilly regions, mid regions, low regions, with varying yield and rainfall patterns. One of the very important thing is for tea is sunlight and rainfall. That is also another critical thing. So depending on where your estates are located, the yields, everything could vary. Operationally, how they were structured was each estate had a superintendent. He's the manager for the estate. Then it is divided into various fields. Each field had divisional heads who were for planning the whole thing and for labor allocation. So this is how the management structure and the operational structure works in estates. So let's look at each of these things, and we will also consider some what it means by that. Core activity, first and foremost, the biggest activity is some manual tea plucking by seasonal labor. Now, you would have all seen probably in some videos, etc. You would see people plucking leaves. Now, essentially, the whole tea industry largely works based on manual plucking. Of course, now there are some shear harvesters where they cut and harvest. There are even machine harvesters which are there. So this concept of picking the leaf is called plucking, and that is where the maximum labor is used in an estate, and that is one of the biggest cost contributors in tea. So what is important from an operational perspective in plucking is the leaf maturity. Very simply put, if you pluck the leaf too late, then it becomes coarse. Then the tea does not give you the same flavor. When you pick it up very young, then those are too succulent. It does not give enough quantity of tea for the efforts you are putting in. You should pick it up at the right point. That is the most important thing, right? Then it gives you the quantity and the quality. As very, very simply put on this thing, as the leaf ages, that is the more growth it has in the leaf, the less quality it gets. But at the same time, as the leaf is smaller earlier, but onwards, the quantity is less and it grows in quantity. So you have to balance somewhere in between for the quality and quantity, because it's otherwise difficult to manage the cost. So, in fact, there are some estates in Darjeeling and all where they pick at the bud stage very, very young leaves, and these are called tips, and they get a very, very high price, but that is very rare. You will get very little quantity. It won't make profitable tea business on an overall basis. So, one second. So the most important thing is to get that. So how do they do that in an estate? They have what is known as a plucking schedule. estates are very large, huge place. It's not possible to just walk from one end to another and do the work also. So generally they plan that they divide the estate into many fields, right? Smaller areas called fields. And they will say, okay, field number 1, we'll do plucking today. And then after X days, we'll come back for field number 1 again. Because by then, fresh leaves would have grown to the right size. As I said, right size is very important. The right size also depends on the type of tea you have put there. These are called bushes, tea bushes, right? So which plant grade you have planted originally, and tea lives for 50, 60 years. So this could have been planted long back. In fact, there are tea which is living for more than 100 years also. So everywhere you could have different a kind of yields which are coming and different growth pattern depending on the grade of tea you are doing also, tea bushes which are planted. So they have what is known as this plucking schedule. So which field, how many times I should pick, in which season. Now, typically what I do in a full growing season, sometimes when the rainfall and sunlight are lower, then the growth will be slower. So obviously I don't use the same number of days cycle in that period because it won't give me that much crop. So I will have to extend the time. I'll have to give it a little more time to grow before I go for plucking. So the plucking schedule can vary depending on the season also. Then coming to the processing, once the leaf is plucked, right, they are all brought to the factory. We'll talk about that factory, this thing as the second point. In the factory, there are largely 2 types of teas which are manufactured. There are other types, but these are the 2 maximum produced kind of teas. The manufacturing method, not the grades. Ultimately, each of these provides various quality of tea. In each type of manufacture, you will get multiple quality of tea. We're not talking about the quality of tea here, but that type of manufacture. There are broadly 2 manufacturers which are large in India and Sri Lanka and all that. That is all these countries except China. China has a third variety which is very large. The 2 varieties are the CTC and Orthodox. And then the second part of processing which is critical is to understand how the leaf quality can be maintained by bringing it quickly to the factory. As we discussed, these leaves are plucked from the bush. So if you keep it like that for long, we know that it with us, right? Every green leaf does that. So even at home, when we buy spinach and all that, we generally consume it the same day. We don't store it for long. The reason is they will wilt away. So their quality will not be as good as when they are fresh. So the most important thing is also to try and get quick transport to the factory. So it will give better tea. So that is from a processing perspective. Then post-processing perspective, the made tea, once it is made, is stored and it is also dispatched via third-party logistics. So we don't generally know estates own their own vehicles and all that. They send through other logistics members only. Then it's moved in huge quantity. That's why it's called bulk movement. Total lorry loads will be sent to Colombo or other auction sectors where it is sold. This is what normally happens in a tea plantation from a core activity perspective. And other than, of course, all the other agricultural operations, which we are not now looking at, right? So in this, what happened historically, it was going like this. Historically, every factory had its own, every estate had its own factory. And then from there, they used to send it, etc. So many a times you had huge factories 3-4 times the capacity than what the estate can produce. So slowly over a period, they came to these ideas called cluster model, where they started sharing infrastructure between factories or between estates, right? So one of the key things is the gas drying, where you bring the leaf and dry them, right? Now this drying requires a lot of heat to be generated and supplied at a certain temperature only. So you need equipments to do that. Now, do I put these equipments in each estate separately, or can I centralize it? So this model gives some benefits of centralizing. So that is something which is to be considered. In that, what happens? There is a high logistics cost due to lack of centralized route planning, because these are historic. They have been doing it like that for donkey's years. So it's been just continuing. So there is a high logistics cost. Why? Because the truck will go to 20 different spots, pick up, go to one factory, and some other truck will go for another 20 different spots and pick up and go to the factory. So there was no centralized planning, which took the best routes possible to get to the best benefit. Then delays in plucking to processing cycle impact the quality and cost. So at the same time, you have to balance. You cannot say, okay, we will just try and make a full load by going all over and then come. Then it might get significantly delayed. It may not even come in a reasonable time for better manufacturing output from that. So it has to be balanced. So this is the challenge which happens, right? So in this next, coming back to the specific company we are talking about, it was a privately held tea company headquartered in Sri Lanka. It was backed by agro investment firms and a sustainability focused private equity fund. So well managed company from a governance perspective. Generally, it was formed by a consolidation of many mid-sized estates across Sri Lanka. So historically, there were many small mid-sized estates. These got aggregated into one company, and that is how this company was formed long back. So it has various things. It operates in 3 zones: highland cluster, where largely orthodox teas were being done; midland and lowland clusters, where mostly CTC was being produced. CTC was used more in local market and for some export market also, right? Each of the zones differ in elevation, which is the height from sea level. The height from sea level determines the kind of growth, speed of growth, which is there in tea. It also affects the quality of the tea taste, right, which is coming from that. Then the rainfall patterns are different. The bush types, that is what grade of tea you have originally planted there, varies. All this affect the plucking cycle, because like I told you, whether I will pluck every 6 days, every 7 days, or every 10 days, a particular field depends on how fast the leaf can grow back, how fast new set of leaves of the right size can grow. So that determines the whole thing, which is affected by all the other factors. So considering that, the plucking cycle will have to be decided, right? Plucking cycle means how many days, once in how many days do we go and pluck the same field? In some parts, tea cultivation is seasonal. There are huge production months when it's called flush. Flush periods are when tea is growing very fast. Then there are lean periods. In the lean periods, tea is growing very slow. Tea will still be growing, but it will be growing slow. So in flush periods, we may do 4 days, 5 days cycle, and in lean periods, we may do a 10-day cycle. So obviously, it requires less manpower to pluck. Less crop will also be available. So that is another side of it, right? So this is the overall position of the company. What the company was looking at was to standardize practices and embed sustainability, how to make it survive all the wherewithal and be good. Then, as I was saying, the whole industry is affected by rising input costs, and there were also fragmented systems. So there is a need for cost rationalization. Without cost rationalization, not just profitability, the survivability of these plantations itself becomes a question mark. So it's critical. In fact, you would have noticed in India also many plantations have gone out of production, primarily because they could not sustain profitably. So if you can't sustain profitably, you can't continue the business. So this is another major concern which was there before the company. So they looked and they launched a restructuring exercise to standardize the operations, get the best practices put everywhere, and bring in better cost management and bring in better productivity. This was the whole objective. So first step, what did they do? They benchmark the estates. Whom do we know is, how do we know which one to look for, where to look for good practices? So first benchmark the estates. So they took some simple, ready, available information. What is the cost per kg of made tea in each of the estate? What is the labor productivity? That is for how many people, how much kilos of tea is being produced, right? Because I told you it's a labor intensive process. The whole process is labor intensive. So one of the good thumb measures is labor productivity. That is how much tea per person is being made. Then gas consumption per batch. So for every 2000 kilos of tea produced, how much gas is being consumed? Because one of the high costs is to use of gas for drying the tea. What we see is black tea, right? From the green leaf, it becomes black tea by basically drying and removing the moisture and making it burnt or close to burnt. It's not exactly burnt, close to burnt. So that's where the maximum fuel cost is happening. Like I said, plucking the leaf is one of the biggest people cost which is happening. Then gas consumption is one of the biggest fuel cost which is happening. Okay. Then also transport downtime, because all this leaf from various places will have to be brought to the factory. They cannot be carried like this and brought. Right? There are huge kilos which has to be brought. So transporting in that terrain, in that kind of environment is critical. So that is another area of concern. Then from these benchmarking, high performing estates were taken and made as models for best practices. How do they control gas? Why are they getting better efficiencies? To understand that, try and implement everywhere. What kind of irrigation discipline they are maintaining to ensure that they get better crop and lesser irrigation cost, water cost, right? That is also another key thing which was looked at. Then they formed a cluster rationalization task force where there were people from the field, there were factory employees and some finance representatives also who were involved in each of these task force, and they were asked to redesign the whole trip planning for the vehicle, how it should go, pick up and come. They were asked to analyze the gas conversion ratios and identify what should be done. They were asked to look at whether we can consolidate interstate logistics. Can we move leaf to one factory instead of running 4 factories? Because I said there are flush season and there are lean season. Now, if in out of 365 days, if in 100 days my factory is going to produce 1000 kilos per day, then I need a factory of the size 1000 kilos per day. But in all the other 200 days, I may be producing only 500 kgs per day. My cost will significantly go up. So one of the thought was, can we rationalize Can we run some factories for 100 days, some factories only for the whole year, because they will get leave from here and as well as from the next estate. So can we rationalize? So these are things which were looked at by each of those cluster rationalization task force. They also looked at underusing assets. Like I told the example, every factory might have huge assets because it was built for the maximum capacity. But you do maximum capacity only on few days. So most of the time the assets are idling. So is there a way of sharing resources? Is there a way of sharing tractors? Right? So this is something which was very clearly looked at. And it was purely a bottom-up approach. They say empower the estate managers to recommend field level changes. So it was not something thrust from the corporate. It was bottom up. From the estates, they chose what would be good changes to make, which would improve productivity, profitability, etc. Right? The central leadership only was ensuring alignment and monitoring. That is, if some good practice is coming from one, are we actually getting the good practices across everywhere? So these are the things they were looking at, right? So now let's look at in this the key challenges and responses, what they did, right? So the first one is there were delayed plucking cycles up to 12 days. So like I said, plucking cycle, which field do I come back and pluck again in how many days? The longer you take, the more coarse leaf you get. That is, the leaf becomes bigger. As the leaf grows, we know it becomes coarse, right? It's not tender. Tea should be tender leaves. 2 leaf and a bud is what is the ideal standard, but that ideal standard is not always necessarily this thing. So some people use 2 leaf and a bud, some people say 3 leaf and a bud. Somewhere there is the standards. That depends on the quality of tea you want to manufacture for the market, etc. Right? But if you really leave it longer, it really becomes too coarse. So it does not give you good tea. So it leads to higher factory rejections. So when you send it to the factory, they will say, oh, coarse leaf is too much. So we will have to discard some of these. So for this, what was the answer measure they took? They rolled out a 7-day pluck discipline program. So everywhere there were trainings given to ensure all the supervisory people also had good control and monitoring to ensure the 7-day plucking discipline is maintained. See, all this from data centric, this thing, you can see the data later centrally, but without using it at the field, without the people who are supervising, pushing for it to happen, because it's a huge, locationally huge, vast area. You can give them the data, but they have to implement it. So they were trained, and that brought in significant results in due course. Then the second challenge they faced was fuel inefficiencies in gas-fired CTC plants, because they had some manual damper controls and poor insulation. So they looked at, there are estates which were doing very good fuel efficiency. There are estates which are not doing very good fuel efficiency. So they looked at the reasons. They found that they ensure insulation is always repaired immediately. So better insulation is there. So heat does not escape. So you're not wasting energy. Instead of manual damper controls, they had better digital controls. So with this, then they did a retrofitting, right? So they brought in digital temperature monitors. They upgraded the pipeline insulation wherever the estates were poor, and they made it work. Now, this is what they did. But from a learning perspective, what we also need to see is when we do this, we have to do a cost benefit analysis. we have to look at, array, by spending this additional capex, what is the benefit we are going to get? That's when we actually go and spend. So those were looked at, the cost benefit was analyzed, and then only it was actually done, right? Because no company spends money without knowing that they are going to be getting better results because of that. Similarly, irrigation mismanagement, it was happening because drip systems were abandoned or there were outdated sprinklers. So for this, what they did, they again found who was doing a very good thing, and then they decided, okay, we'll centralize the purchase of all these drip kits. They also decided, okay, wherever idle pumps are there, we'll redeploy them. So we can put them to better use. So this is how they manage the inventory of various assets across the estates. Otherwise, each estate will be sitting with some inventory, which they may not be using at that point of time. But these machinery might be required somewhere else, and it could be useful. So all that was planned and done. They become centralized and deployed. Then there were uncoordinated trip routes and idle vehicles. This was leading to increased transport costs. So again, through the study, they consolidated the trip routes and also included vehicle rotation to ensure that vehicles are all put to use reasonably well, and there is also time given for some of the vehicles to get maintained in between to ensure that they have good maintenance, right? So they again perform better. This was possible because they consolidated the routes. If they had not consolidated, every vehicle would probably be running ineffectively every day. But then they won't be maintained well because there is no time for that. All that will also be the consequence. So by consolidating, you not only save the mileage costs, etc., but you also ensure that you can better maintain the vehicles, again, because of which you get further cost benefits. So all this led to a reduction in cost per kg of made tea. It improved. So with the reduction, there was improved leaf quality and greater operational consistency. So one side, the quality went up, the other side, the cost went down. So it's not additional cost for additional quality or additional reduction in cost for sacrificing quality. It was improving this and at the same time saving costs. So post restructuring improvements, what happened? 60% of the estates follow a 6 to 7 plucking cycle. That is, in every 6 or 7 days they go pluck. Leaf to made tea efficiency, that is, for every kilo of green leaf plucked, they were getting 23.5% tea. So for every 100 kgs of green leaf plucked, they got 23.5 kgs of tea. Earlier, they were getting 21.8 kgs of tea. So they were losing, in every 100 kgs plucked, they were losing about 1.5 kgs of tea, which is substantial in a margin like this, 23 to 21. The difference is substantial. Labor productivity improved without increasing man hours. So by doing this, their productivity also went up. When you do a 6 to 7 day plucking cycle, the pluckers are able to pluck more because it's all in the right growth. It's all there in more buds are there per square meter. So they are able to get more crop, good crop, without coarse leaf. So their productivity goes up. So it helps in all ways. Similarly, gas optimization, this applies to mainly to the CTC estates where the heat requirement is high. They introduced thermo-controlled dryers and insulated pipelines, like I told you, resulted in 15 to 18% reduction in gas cost. There is a significant savings. So cost per kg of made tea reduced by about 2 to 3 rupees on a cost of about 40, 50 rupees in those days, 2 to 3 rupees, substantial. 5%, 6% savings is very substantial. Then batch-wise output consistency also improved because of all these effects. Logistics enhancements, routes were clustered, then shared vehicle usage across estates was brought in, so that what happens is all vehicles are used in a better manner, more effectively, and they are given enough time off because it's all rotated. They are given time off for maintenance, etc. Idling truck hours dropped because they were put to better use. Peak season dispatches were streamlined through trip clubbing. Like I said, the whole problem in tea industry is some months you have a huge crop, some months you have a very low crop. You have to balance both and do it. So in peak season, you deploy all the vehicles to go on trip clubbing to pick up from everywhere and bring it. Overall, monitoring and accountability was introduced. Monthly KPI reviews were institutionalized for each cluster. A more disciplined and cost-aware estate operations culture was emerging. That's how they brought it a change. A change management was brought in. So overall, if you see, manual burners and outdated dampeners were costing 20 to 25% higher cost. The best estates were doing at 0.68 per kg per kg of made tea, whereas poor estates were spending as much as 0.85 to 0.9 kg of gas per kg of made tea. Huge cost difference. Plucking efficiency, because of the cycle I was talking about, the more leaf availability which is there in those days, disciplined estates were able to get 400 to 425 kgs plucked by one plucker every month, which is as against 200 to 300 kgs in the case of poor estates. This is about 35% difference. 35% difference is 35% labor cost increase. So there is a significant savings which comes from this. Irrigation process similarly, idle pumps, uneven sprinkle coverage, all that was leading to poor bush health because you need to water them well. So well-managed estates were showing more leaf per hectare. So there was more crop coming because it was well managed. So water is not just about how effectively you use the sprinkler. Am I running good sprinklers? Am I having idle assets or not? That's one side of it. If you do it properly, you get more crop, which is fantastic. So with this whole thing, they were able to significantly improve the cost per kg, leading to the company becoming viable. From a very distressed position, they become viable. While doing this, they also noticed there were a lot of governance issues which needs to be addressed, governance or compliance issues which needs to be addressed. So there were poor records. Everything was being manually recorded. So there was huge mismatch between the plucking records which were written in the field and what factory said they have received. In the field, the supervisor says 100 people plucked, each about 40 kilos. So 4,000 kilos were sent to the factory. The factory will say, I received only 3,000 kilos when I weighed. There's a gap. What happened to the missing? Because it's a cost. You are paying on one side for plucking 4,000 kilos. The employees are paid for plucking 4,000 kilos, but you actually get only 3,000 kilos. So there is these gaps in compliance have their own cost effect also. Gaps in gas logs, similarly, dryer setting documentation. So if your effectiveness is not there, we saw 0.68 has become 0.9 consumption. So again, nearly 25% additional consumption, which is cost, right? Manual fuel and irrigation records lacked oversight. So all this manual records, there was no supervision, nothing happening. So the best practices which they were noticing is there were daily plucker dashboards. Then there was weighbridge which was linked to this thing. There were scales which were digitalized, so it automatically recorded. Then they had a QR code based vehicle tracking for diesel fuel, right? Then SOPs were enforced for gas usage. So by making all these correctives thing, they got into a significantly better position. So now let's look at it from our various subject perspective in what we saw. From a strategic, financial, and cost management, one is labor and fuel are a very significant cost. So you should look at how to control these costs. Then there are hidden leakages like underutilized assets, untracked diesel usage, non-standard procurement, where you have not standardized, like what we were seeing that by standardizing, they were able to get better trip kits. So these are again things which we learn from there. What kind of strategic and financial cost management inputs are required in this? Transport optimization will have to be looked at. There were partial loads, repeated trips, right? So how do you fix this? You club the trips and make vehicle rotation. So you can get full loads as much as possible. So when this was tested out, they found that there could be 15 to 20% cost savings in the estates which ran this pilot. So they started doing trip-wise costing from a centralized fleet logs so that they can try and improve it and continuously monitor towards improving. On the other side, they also looked at asset rationalization. They identified all the idle pumps, duplicate dryers, old vehicles, right? Rolled out interstate asset pooling model. So I have some surplus, you need something, we can exchange so that everybody can use the assets to the best possible thing across instead of wasting on further investment. Otherwise, what will happen is one estate will be having some idle vehicles. Another estate will be buying vehicle because its old vehicle has gone under repair. So by pooling of these assets and centralized monitoring, they brought in efficiencies into wasteful investments into assets. Then factory energy metrics, we saw how they worked on cost benefit on gas consumption, which reduced significant amount of money by doing two things: improving the efficiency of the equipments which are in use, then improving the insulations. All that brought in significant amount of savings. And from there, they put the future rollout plan for the future to have standard operating procedures for plucking discipline, factory gas usage, irrigation scheduling, etc., and a digital monitoring mechanism to ensure that these things are being adhered to and somebody can look at it. Simultaneously, all this also requires people to get better understanding so that they work on this. So there were also a lot of supervisor training on plucking efficiency, how they can work towards transport cost controls, how they can improve their quality protocols, how do they ensure that better quality is maintained at the work spot. Then the others which were on the way when the engagement got completed were the shared asset pools. They were working on that further. And then seasonal logistics for combining routes whenever there is a lower production, etc., and you don't get full loads. Then from a governance and compliance perspective, they introduced quarterly estate level audits, operational audits by others. So look at how things are being done well. It's not a internal audit or a statutory audit by charter governance, but an operational audit on the quality and compliance with various requirements, with a special focus on fuel usage, labor cost tracking. So the whole idea was to bring in a lean, scalable estate model to make it survive and sustainable. So in this background, I'm going to talk about some case study questions, right? And whoever has questions can put any queries right onto the chat box. And if you have some question to ask also, you can ask and we can take it through. So let's look at this case. GreenHarvest Estate discovered that some factory clusters with identical capacities have vastly different cost per kg figures for made tea. Cluster A uses 0.68 kg of gas per kg, while cluster B uses 0.92 kg. Additionally, estates with lower plucking frequency have a 15% lower conversion efficiency than those operating on a 6 to 7 day cycle. So this is the other thing which happens. Tender leaves require less gas to dry it. Coarse leaves requires more effort to dry it and make it into final tea. So there is a 15% conversion efficiency which was coming. Management wants to standardize performance by identifying root causes and introducing financial controls linked to fuel usage and plucking discipline. So the first question is, what role can estate level cost metrics play in improving strategic financial planning? The second is, how can financial controls help link fuel usage and plucking efficiency to bottom line impact? Any thoughts you can put in here? We will also see the detailed answer for this in a minute. So let's look at the solution on this and what is coming from here. So first, let's look at the background. There is enhanced cost visibility and benchmarking, right? Metrics like gas usage per kg of tea, labor cost per hectare, or conversion efficiency. It allows for comparison. For instance, in this specific case itself, cluster B has higher gas usage, 35% more than cluster A, immediately can highlight operational inefficiency. So the first benefit is enhanced cost visibility and benchmarking. The second is to bring in activity-based costing. What is activity-based costing? ABC helps allocate overheads, fuel, labor maintenance based on actual usage. For example, estates with inefficient plucking cycle will incur higher indirect cost per kg of output, obviously inflating cost base. So that will also be another area which will show up very clearly when you do a ABC. Forecasting and budgeting techniques can be used, right? So it gives you accurate cost metrics for improved budgeting. Projected fuel usage and labor needs can be fine-tuned based on factual historical data. So that is another thing which can be done. Break-even analysis and profitability estimation. So identifying estate level cost per kg, GreenHarvest can determine contribution margins more accurately. So you can look at this kind of cost, when do I break even? So, or what I should do to make it profitable and break even. Continuous variance analysis. So when you regularly track standard versus actual, not only for fuel, but for everything. In this particular case, talks about fuel. And so it's talked about fuel here. So this allows for early detection of any variations which are coming. Looking at how it can help in bottom line impact, standard costing versus variance monitoring. So you can set fuel usage. Like for example, we saw it is 0.68 to 0.9. So you can say, okay, I am now going to bring in some benchmarks. 0.7 is a benchmark. I'm not saying 0.68, which is the best probably. I'm saying somewhere which is reasonable, 0.7. Okay, then I will check every estate whether they are actually reaching it, what they are doing to reach that. If somebody is at 0.9, then what is the issue and why they cannot bring it down to 0.7. So it's like a target. They are moving towards a target. So setting such standard cost and then you can monitor the variance is one thing which can be put in. You can bring in incentive linked operational metrics. So you can say that wherever estates are continuously maintaining a 6 to 7 day cycle for plucking, because it's going to result in significant improvement in profitability ultimately, you can say that there will be some performance related bonus which can be considered. Just an example. I'm not saying it's the best way to do it, right? Similarly, fuel efficiency bonus, where they are operating below the benchmark. These are things which can be an incentive linked operational metrics which can be put in. Then there can be dashboards and real-time monitoring. So the third one is more from the management perspective, how you can monitor and push for change. Then for the individual estate managers and supervisors, fixing their KPIs, right, linked to returns. At the estate level, at the corporate level, every level. So everybody is focused on getting the performance in place. Cost benefit and ROI analysis of intervention. So every major step which is being taken, do a cost benefit or a return on investment analysis to ensure that it's actually giving the expected returns. Some illustrative example, for example, cluster B saves 24.24 kg of gas, right? If it becomes efficient, 0.92 to 0.68, the difference is 0.24. If assuming 80 rupees per kg is this thing and 10,000 kgs are made, we are talking about a monthly saving of 192,000. So based on this kind of a calculation, then you can decide, okay, we'll give a target like this, and if they achieve it, maybe some incentive of 10,000 can be given. Because the substantial saving is there, right? And let's suppose if you have to take some intervention, some training, some monitoring tools, etc., together you're going to spend 500,000. You know that in less than 6 months you can recover it by the savings you will make. So the ROI is 452%. So there are significant benefits in doing this. So what is the strategic management frameworks which are being used? As we saw earlier, standard costing and variance analysis, cost benefit analysis, right? So each of this is being used in this ROI and NPV analysis, balance scorecard, how it is aligned, your KPIs are getting aligned to some results at various levels. Lean management principles. So the idea is to focus on waste reduction. So you avoid gas wastage, you avoid excessive labor hours being spent by improving the whole thing based on data-driven decision making. So you look at the data, you are able to monitor well, and you bring in these changes. So these are some strategic management frameworks which are used in arriving at these solutions which they've come up with. So this is where our theoretical learning from the different subjects also comes into play, and it is linked with how exactly people find solutions in the estate. In the same case study, the next angle we are looking at is strategic cost management. So during the estate review, GreenHarvest found that multiple estates within close proximity were operating separate irrigation pumps, maintaining duplicate fertilizer inventory. So each one was keeping their own inventory and using individual tractors, even when daily utilization was below 30%. Meanwhile, vehicle fuel costs were significantly higher in estates that continued dispatching partially loaded produce trucks instead of clubbing dispatches. Management wants to explore a shared resource strategy to reduce duplicate costs. How can shared asset model contribute to estate level cost efficiency? What are the key cost saving levers in adopting centralized resource management? Now, this again is something which was actually experienced in this company and affected, based on which the questions have been put and then for the case study it has been taken in. So looking at it from a shared asset model, let's look at what are the things which are coming. First thing which can come is improved asset utilization. So if 3 estates have 3 tractors and you are using them only 30%, you need only 1 tractor which can go to all the 3 estates, provided you can manage it in the right time. So surely there is a significant saving. You don't need 2 tractors. So much of capital investment is wasted, right? So shared use of tractors, irrigation pumps, and warehousing ensures higher operating hours and capacity use. So this is the first thing which came. Moving from a 30 to 70% utilization defers new capex and reduces idle time cost per estate. So obviously every estate is going to benefit by doing this. So improved asset utilization. Then reduction in fixed and redundant costs. By having more vehicle, you have to have more drivers. You have to have more servicing. So obviously your fixed costs are also being additionally incurred, and many of it is redundant because you don't really need it. With fewer machines or fewer vehicles, you will need less of all this. So automatically your redundant costs will also come down. Centralized planning and coordination. So like I said, every estate, if they were taking a decision for assets, then each estate will buy what they need. But their need is only for 30% of the time or 25% of the time. They are not looking at whether something is idle somewhere else. They don't even know. But by centralizing the whole planning and coordination, you can bring in better asset utilization, and obviously it reduced costs everywhere. Then it also leads to lower fuel consumption. Shared tractors and pooled transport will reduce the distance traveled per metric ton dispatched. So instead of sending part loads from every estate, if I'm able to collect from 3 estates and send one full load, then I save, because from the estate to Colombo, there are 3 trucks which are running part load, or I send everything in one truckload as a full load. Significant savings. 15-20% is nothing. Actually, there could be much more significant savings if it is really so big a gap, which was happening. Because initially, the whole operating and managing structure was estate-wise, that's it. So each estate ran their own operations. By centralizing, by bringing in coordination, you can get significant savings. With all this, you bring in a scalable cost structure. The share models provides for expansion without significant linear cost increases. So you can gradually increase the cost because you are able to spread it over a larger asset base or larger operating base. So coming to the various cost levers in adopting centralized resource management, right? fuel optimization, reduce equipment duplication, bulk procurement efficiency, not only in terms of how much you buy, but at what price. Better negotiation also happens, right? By bulk procurement. Labor consolidation, so you reduce labor costs. Maintenance pooling, again, you reduce the cost there. Digital monitoring for better accountability. All this can be brought in into the system. What was again applied here? Activity-based costing, which gives you an output into or a focus into where the cost issues are there. We look at total cost of ownership. So how much is my total cost of ownership for the shared tractors as against individually owned tractors? It gives you the benefit. Then break-even analysis. If I have to spend so much to get this done, how quickly do I get benefits which will give me a return? Then economies of scale by enhancing the whole thing. Like, for example, centralizing fertilizer bulk buying, centralizing procurement of machinery. You could negotiate better, you could get better cost benefits on that also. So economies of scale can also come from this. Then lean management. So less waste. That's what comes out of this. And all this fits in with the value chain activity of the whole infrastructure and operations in the estate management. Now, the other issue we were seeing when we looked at the case studies, there were also issues with the record keeping, like what was plucked in the field and what is received at the factory. There were gaps, the weighbridge quantity and what was in the field. There is difference. The fuel logs are all manually maintained, so there are gaps in all that. Overtime wage registers were not approved in this thing, again maintained manually. There is no control, right? So what are the governance risks in poor management and poor documentation, manual record keeping in a current scenario? And what internal control should be implemented to strengthen compliance? This is the thing. So you can use some framework like COSO for internal controls, right? So it clearly addresses like this. What is the governance risk? There is a data tampering and pilferage. And you can analyze the estate level application, the root cause, and what is the outcome. The second governance risk is damage to company's credibility, which comes from this, because poor controls, poor response coming, etc., leads to loss of trust and adverse audit findings. So obviously it could lead to company's credibility. Unauthorized fuel and wage claims could be the next risk which is there. Inaccurate green leaf intake, that is the quantity of green leaf for which you pay. If it is high and you actually don't get that much green leaf, you get less tea, your costs are going to go up. So inaccurate green leaf intake and yield. Yield is the conversion. For every 100 kilos, how many kilos of made tea you get? If factually the receipt is lower than what is recorded, then obviously you are losing. So that is another thing which can come as a risk there. Missing transportation documentation, because of which there could be other regulatory penalties, etc. Like GST could somewhere find that you are not carrying adequate documentation. They could hold back the material, they could charge penalty, etc. So for each of these, you can implement controls, right? Implement internal controls. For data tampering and pilferage, you can bring in some more digitalization. right? The more digitalization is there, better control is there. For instance, in the good old days, one of the biggest challenges used to be whether a plucker actually was working or whether a worker is actually working in the field or not. Today, with GPS and mobile phone with nearly everybody, you can have GPS tracking, GPS based attendance to ensure that you have digitalized to avoid wastage. Unauthorized usage of fuel or unauthorized wage claims, like I was talking, GPS for individuals, GPS for vehicles, all that is possible now. Inaccurate green leaf intake, again, you can digitalize. You can have digital weighing scales which records, publishes, and probably transmits the data so you can compare what is done there with what is coming in the vehicle. Missing transport documentation and regulatory scrutiny. Here, basically, you can introduce standardization, you can include training, right, to ensure that there is complete compliance for any movement which is being done. And reputation. How do you protect reputation? To ensure that all this is working, you do regular audits. That's one way of doing reputation protection. Audit does not mean audit by an internal auditor or some finance person. Audit could be an operational audit, right? Various interdepartmental quality checks which are there, right? Training is another way by which you can ensure that your entity's credibility is protected. So overall, you can put in estate level control enhancements. So you can have ERPs with mobile interfaces. So what we were talking about, you can have GPS based data which is coming and connecting to a centralized data automatically, right? The second thing is to have clear standard operating procedures which are not only communicated but also enforced. Then you can hold cross-departmental review, operational reviews to ensure that the adherence is also there and it is being done with full gung-ho. Exception reportings could be there to take immediate actions. So these are things which you can put in place to ensure this thing. Now, we'll also look at some MCQ questions. I've kept the calculations very simple, more to get into the idea. So the first one is on a financial efficiency. So if estate A is spending 0.68 kg of gas, right? Whereas estate B is spending 0.92 kg of gas, the gas costs 50 per kg and they produce 10,000 kg. What is the extra cost being incurred? Is it A, B, C, or D? So somebody says A, some more A. So let's look at the answer. Right? So it is, I have kept the calculation simple like I told you. Of course, in the exams, it could be a little more complex calculation, which will take some calculator to work on. Strategic cost management, trip costs. Like I was mentioning, one of the things they did was to move from partially loaded trucks to full truckloads. If each trip saves 50 kilometers, the average diesel cost is 90 per liter and truck runs at 6 km per liter. What is the savings for 30 optimized trips? So if you save 30 trips, how much will be the savings? So various people have put the thing, B is the answer. It's 30 saved trips. Each trip saves 50 kilometers, so 1,500 kilometers. 1,500 kilometers at 6 km per liter means 250 liters saved. 250 liters at 90 is 22,500. That's how it is coming, right? Then looking at the governance risk, when the audit finds missing transport challans and fuel logs, what is the primary risk associated with such lapses? Reduced plucking yield, poor market demand, statutory non-compliant and audit red flags, or high fertilizer costs? Obviously, C. Everybody has put that. Cost optimization by asset sharing. If 3 estates share an irrigation pump, instead of capex of 2 lakhs per estate now, that is 2 lakhs per estate will be spent, but instead 3 estates are going to share one. They will have only one of the 3 estates, and if the asset depreciation is over 4 years, and further the asset had a 12% AMC cost, what is the combined annual savings? So by sharing pumps, what is the combined annual savings, right? So 1,48,000. The reason is instead of 6 lakhs being spent, we are going to spend only 2 lakhs. So 4 lakhs is the savings, and depreciation on that is a lakh. And AMC on 4 lakhs, which will also be a saving, is at 12%, 48,000, 1,48,000 is the savings coming from that. Looking at compliance control, what is the most effective internal control for preventing ghost worker entries in plucking wage records? Monthly wage audits, verbal reporting, manual registers, biometric link, wage assistance. So D, yes. Actually, it has moved beyond biometric now to GPS based biometric or whatever. GPS and biometric linked. For example, IRCTC, I believe, has been testing with this thing for people working on the trains with a mobile phone based GPS and biometric link mechanism of reporting to ensure that they are actually working. So we come to the end of the first study, right? At this point, I've just stopped the sharing. Maybe it's time, yeah, about 7:50 now. Maybe we can take a 10-minute break and then we can start with the second study. At 8 o'clock sharp, we will start a 10-minute break so that we can come rejuvenated and continue with this second case study, right? Thank you all. And after the second case study, if there are any specific questions, we'll take it up. Thank you. Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Good evening, all. Now we come to the second case study. This is comparatively a little smaller case study. This is about, again, an actual case which has happened past for various reasons, but more on transport, how it can be rationalized, etc. That is the whole thing about how the distribution is being addressed. PCAR Products is a FMCG company, and they work on a C&F agent distributor model. They had they had a lot of C&F agents across India, and from the C&F agents location, it then goes to the distributors or the wholesalers, as they are called, whichever way depends on how it is done in various locations. So from the factory, the goods comes to the C&F agent who maintains a warehouse. They are stored there, and based on orders coming from various markets, it is dispatched. Very high costs are incurred on the secondary freight, which is the freight from the C&F agent onwards. That's called secondary freight. So a cost-effective solution there could become a significant savings for the company and significant improvement in operational profitability as well as operational ability, right? Sustainability. Now, this case study focuses on C&F hubs in two locations, Pollachi, which is in Tamil Nadu, and Vijayawada, which is in Andhra Pradesh, right? These were two critical nodes of the southern distribution network for this company, right? So that is why these two were picked up and looked at. So basically, to give you a background, these hubs, which are C&F agents, they manage the stock. They, like I said, they have a warehouse. They keep the stocks, right? They get information on all the requests from the distributors coming under their districts, right? Then they plan the daily dispatch based on all these distributor requests which are there. They plan the daily dispatch. The efficiency of route planning, fuel usage, and vehicle deployment is critical for getting benefits. This particular case study also addresses an additional issue which comes from the bifurcation of Andhra and Telangana into two states, which meant obviously maintaining different GST records, etc. Right? So I have modified it slightly that timeline-wise these things happened at different points of time. So, but for simplicity's sake, I have talked about under GST regime. It happened under the pre-GST regime. But it's for simplicity's sake, I have modified to talk under the GST regime. So it will be more in tune with what you are reading in other subjects. So essentially, the focus of the whole study was to look at cost control strategy and GST compliance. So like I was mentioning, the decentralized warehousing is run by C&F agents. So closer to the high demand zones. So the idea is to reduce delivery time and freight costs. That was how it was originally contemplated. The Pollachi and Vijayawada hubs handle daily dispatches of high volume packed goods. Dealer coordination, like I said, all the requests come to them. Dealer coordination across the whole of southern districts were handled by them. Independent freight planning with supports from sales teams. Sales teams from PCAR will give support, etc. But all planning and all will be done by this team, essentially, this company, right? The C&F agent. Now, most important is it says high demand zones. So that's how you originally pick up the C&F agent, right? But then over a period, your market changes, your traction moves. So how frequently do you relook at this? Do you daily go and see, or every year do you review whether I should change the C&F? It's too much of a hassle. You can't change every year and all. So, but once in a while, you need to relook. That's something which will also be coming up in this, right? In this case study, when we see, that's one of the things which will come up as a issue to be addressed. So the whole model was on a hybrid transport model. There were some C&F owned vehicles. There were hired trucks. Then they also use parcel service, right? All this, when you are trying to balance and do it, there has to be tight cost control. You have to make a significant route efficiency and at the same time ensure your compliances are well in place, because non-compliance could directly affect the parent company, PCAR. Though the C&F agent is doing a lot of paperwork, it is in the name of PCAR. So any compliance issue will affect PCAR, which is a very large Indian FMCG company, right? So it is also important to ensure that compliances are well managed. At the same time, the whole thing is done effectively so that the costs are low. This again talks about the same thing. So we skip this, right? So the regulatory impact came because of two things. One is GST being implemented. So there was warehouse planning based on GST, and then AP Telangana split into dual registrations, right? So these two also are covered in this. Like I said, I have theoretically assumed that the split also is in the GST regime, not under the pre-GST regime. Conceptually, it's the same, but for simplicity's sake, I have done like this for the simple matter, what we are discussing here. Again, here, one of the key things is it's all data-driven decision making, right? So one of the key things is without a lot of analysis, you cannot make strategic decisions. That is where various frameworks which you have studied in SFM or in costing, all that becomes important to put to use. So the key issues which were identified were it was a manual experience-based routing which was being done with minimal load consolidation. So what was being done was completely manual based on past experience of the individual who was doing the routing. The routing was being planned. There was no sophisticated software. Like today, if you take companies like Amazon, etc., they are using significantly computerized, digitalized solutions to plan the routing, plan the dispatches. So all that was not being done. Not even simple digitalization, no analysis, nothing. It was all manual experience based. So you don't even know whether it is giving the right results or not. Then there were frequent partial load trips. So if the lorry is not fully loaded, obviously your costs are higher. Then limited visibility due to outsourced logistics. So it's not your vehicle. Many times you are using somebody else's vehicle and it's going, you don't even know what kind of costs you are incurring vis-a-vis what you ought to be incurring. So these are things which were identified in terms of the key issues. So let's look at individually some of these things, right? In the Pollachi hub, what was noticed on a data analysis was that only 20% of the service towns were near the hub. One of the key things is what C&F agent is placed close to high demand zones. But when after these many years, Pollachi is looked at now, only 20% of the material is going to nearby towns. 80% is going elsewhere, far away. Key towns like Trichy, Dindigul, Tanjavur were inefficiently routed via Pollachi because Pollachi to all these places was far. It resulted in long trips, higher fuel usage, and delayed deliveries. In addition, it was also found that there were old trucks which had low fuel efficiencies. Low fuel efficiency means increased costs and lack of consolidation of trips. resulting in multiple trips going to the same location, which added cost. So these were the key findings in Pollachi on a data analysis. In the case of Vijayawada, the findings were different. In Vijayawada, it was found that there is an excessive parcel service usage, right? Instead of full truckloads. There we found that there are partial truckloads being sent. Here, they had full truckload level of quantity, but they were sending it through parcel service, not through truckloads. This meant around 60 to 70,000 rupees extra logistics costs every month from that one location alone. Poor shipment clustering and low vehicle utilization. So they were not clustering together the right way, the right route to get the best this thing. So the utilization is very poor. And post bifurcation, there was a need for a complete compliance reset for AP and Telangana, which was not ideally put in well. Right? These were findings from Vijayawada Hub. So coming again to look at individually the thing, Pollachi, 80% from Pollachi, it was going near Trichy. So actually, if you had the center in Trichy instead of Pollachi, 80% of the dispatches would have been shorter than from Pollachi. Towns were like Tanjavur, Karaikudi, Pudukkottai, which are all more closer to Trichy, were currently being serviced from Pollachi, which is far away. Maybe historically, when originally the C&F was set up in Pollachi, it made sense. But then over the period, the market dynamics change. You have to relook at this. That has not been done. Like I said earlier, inefficient trucks leading to 60-70,000 rupees additional cost and inefficiencies in route rationalization. So this is what was found. Now, because of everybody's understanding, I just put this into a map. This is where Pollachi is on the left corner in that bottom, right? Coimbatore is a nearby big town or a city. Yes, there is a reasonable quantity which goes there. But if you see, 67% is going into this big circle. And another 17% is going into this circle, which together contributes 84%, which theoretically and today's well-connected this thing are much closer to this location in Trichy. So unnecessarily they were being now supplied from a faraway location. This is what was coming up, right? And in CNF, like we saw, extreme over-reliance on parcel service. Then there was no bundling up of trips. Absolutely no control over utilization of vehicles. So these were the things which were found. And additionally, what they noticed was that because the CNF agent is in Vijayawada, which is in Andhra Pradesh, and they supply to dealers who are in Andhra Pradesh as well as in Telangana, if the same customer dealer has outlets in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, there have to be separate billings with separate GST. Otherwise, there could be e-way bill issues. But that has not been well addressed. So they were having bills which were with the wrong GST codes, which were being prepared for the wrong location because they had not set their internal systems well on bifurcation of the state. So billing was being made from Vijayawada, which is in Andhra Pradesh, to a dealer whose one office is in Telangana, but with the GST and other information of Andhra Pradesh of that dealer. This could be a serious challenge in compliances, GST compliances. So these were the things which were found there. So one of the things which was done was a comparison of efficiency for Pollachi and Vijayawada hubs, right? For Pollachi, it was looked at for the distance optimization, how it can be better utilized, and how the aging trucks can be relooked. Whereas for Vijayawada, it was looked at as to how over-reliance on parcel service can be addressed and how more full truckloads can be done, by which there can be cost savings. So this is one example of how in Pollachi, the savings was looked at. So these are the various routes, right? Forget the locations and the distance from Pollachi. Whereas the distance, if it is from Trichy as the hub, what will be the distance? And what is the difference in kilometers? How many trips they made in October? So if the trip had been made in from Trichy instead of Pollachi, what would have been the savings in 1 month in kilometers? So much. So overall, we found about 7,000 kilometers can be the savings in 1 month itself, which is very significant for one C&F agent. And that 7,000 translates to 1,00,000 rupees in those days cost, right? So this was a significant thing which pointed that today, in the current context, Pollachi as the C&F point itself is a wrong choice. Should we actually move elsewhere is the right question to be asked. Then this was also considered with this thing. Their factory was in Indore. So the material was coming to Pollachi C&F agency from Indore, right? When you compare Indore to Pollachi or Indore to Trichy, again something interesting came. The distance is nearly the same. Indore to Pollachi or Indore to Trichy is nearly the same, 1,637 kilometers and 1,690 kilometers. In fact, Trichy is slightly longer. However, when you look at the freight rates which are available from large transporters, Indore to Trichy was 10% cheaper than Indore to Pollachi. Why is that? It was because in today's context, with lot of new roads which have come and all that, and some of the major highways which have been put, there is a huge amount of freight movement happening between Indore and Trichy. So for them, the return load is also more or less certain. So the freights are not always dictated only by the distance. It is also by various other factors. Whereas Pollachi is in some corner. So Indore to Pollachi, if a truck comes, then for the truck to go back to the north, from Pollachi, they may not get anything. Then from Pollachi, he has to go somewhere else to find material most of the time. So there will be empty running, which will be required. So that is what also is one of the factors which drives the freight rate. So by moving to Trichy, you not only save on your secondary freight, you also save on the primary freight. 10% savings on all your freight from factory to the C&F hub. It's a huge saving. Looking at the compliance issue in Vijayawada, as I was saying, every time when there is some movement between Vijayawada, AP and Telangana, it is an interstate movement. So there is a need for dual registration. So some of the dealers, historically, dealers would have multiple town presence. And because historically it was a single state, many of them had some presence in some of the towns in Andhra, some of the towns in Telangana. In the past, it didn't matter. We built to 1%, it's okay, because it was all within the whole Andhra Pradesh earlier. undivided Andhra Pradesh. But now with division, whenever I am sending to the same dealer in Telangana, I have to use a different GST. Whenever I am sending to the same dealer in Andhra Pradesh, I have to use a different GST. This had not been properly aligned into the databases, so which led to a lot of miscompliance. Though the tax was paid, it was paid under the wrong compliances, and the materials moving to some other location or some other state, not location, some other state, without the proper GST being put in. So if it had been stopped on the way, it could have been a major risk. Even the IGST, CGST utilization priority varies depending on where it goes, right? So all this comes and puts an issue on top. The second thing which we were talking about is that the parcel service. The Vijayawada C&F agency took a very easy thing. Okay, whatever comes, we'll just put it onto parcel. It's easier. Process-wise easier. I don't have to apply my mind. Nobody was thinking. Like in the other case, what we saw, there is a lot of routing which is done based on manual work, based on past experience. His experience was what was being converted into routing. Now, if I have to do parcel service, I don't have to do any routing. Because in a parcel service, I'm booking parcel for each one separately. But ho gaya, mera kaam ho gaya. Somebody else, the guy who's taking the parcel is doing all the routing. But obviously, he's going to charge me more. So, we found that there were significant savings which are possible by changing those. Similarly, in Pollachi, we also saw that we were using inefficient trucks and also using inefficient trip scheduling. So by making some hybrid transport model, there could be a significant savings there also, right? So this is what was coming. And we talked about the GPS tracking, which we spoke in the previous case study also, right? GST documentation gaps, like I was mentioning, because of the two different states. One is the wrong billing which is being done. Second is how we are adjusting ITC. The CGST, SGST and IGST, how we are adjusting varies depending on whether I'm selling within the state or outside the state. So all these risks fall on, compliance risks fall on the company if there are errors in that. So many of these can be addressed by automating some of these things, GPS-based validations, right? SOP-driven documentation, and also some periodic reconciliation or periodic review, which needs to be done. Now, in the backdrop of this, let's look at some scenarios in this case study also, right? The first case study we are going to look at is on focusing more on strategic financial management aspects. PCare C&F agent currently operates on an asset-light logistics model, relying on third-party vendors and parcel services for product delivery, right? So he's either giving it to third-party vendor or parcel service. A cost optimization process review at Vijayawada revealed that use of parcel service for large volume routes is adding 60 to 70,000 in monthly avoidable costs. The logistics team is now considering shifting to a hybrid model where full truckload routes are managed through leased or semi-owned vehicles, while low volume dispatches continue through outsourced channels. So instead of third-party vendor or parcel service, for at least the large volume routes, it was looked at whether we can lease or semi-owned vehicle and then use that for dispatch. So in this scenario, what are the key financial implications of shifting from a fully outsourced model to hybrid logistics model? So, what are the differences? What are the various factors which we need to consider in evaluating this? Any thoughts on this? Any of you can put any thoughts on the chat box. It will be good. Right? I see that you have all reacted on MCQs, but these type of questions are also to be answered. So, what are the financial implications of shifting from fully outsourced model to a hybrid logistics model? What are your thoughts? Some thoughts, of course. Not everything is going to come on chat box now quickly like this. We can discuss this. Any thoughts on this? Yes, I see some savings in cost, more higher operational costs could be there because of going in for hybrid model. It has to be a more programmed model. It saves cost and time. Yeah, okay. So let's look at that. The second aspect is how do you evaluate return on investment, right? So that is also something we are going to see. Please keep putting your thoughts. I will also look at this thing separately while we are doing this. Please put your thoughts on how to evaluate ROI also for this. Increase cost due to leasing. Costs and benefits have to be looked into. Reducing depreciation, make or buy or lease, right? So many thoughts have come. Good. So let's look at the various things. First is cost savings. I've just tried to put it together, right? First is cost savings. First, what happens? There is a reduction in parcel service costs. Then, by putting full truckloads, you get economies of scale. These are the things you should evaluate from a cost saving perspective. Then, at the same time, there is an increased fixed cost. Somebody was saying that you need to compare the cost benefit. Yes, this is that. One cost saving, the other is the increase in fixed cost. What is the increase in fixed cost? You have to either own the asset or lease the asset. Both lead to increase in fixed costs. There has to be monthly lease payments or depreciation if it is owned. Then there has to be maintenance, insurance, driver, all that will come. Then there has to be staffing and training, which is what I was talking about. So there is an increased fixed cost. On the other side, there is a savings on this side. So we need to see how they balance. That is what is going to determine what we are going to do with it, right? Variable cost trade-offs. So outsourced parcel service have purely variable costs, while hybrid model introduce a mix of fixed and variable costs. So the break-even point must be analyzed. So next concept we are coming into is cost-benefit analysis. We saw break-even point, right? Now, what is the hybrid model introducing mix of fixed and variable costs? There is some fixed costs like either the lease payment or the driver salary, etc. But there is also a variable cost of the fuel, etc., which is based on trips you are going to make. You make less trips, less cost, more trips, more cost, right? There is also working capital impact. All this is fine. My outsource model means paisa dene ka, bill dega 1 month ka baad I need to give payment. Fine, no problem. But now I have to pay upfront for acquiring an asset. So I need capital. So cash flow, how it will be impacted is another thing which needs to be looked at. So last week when we discussed about the outsourcing versus then later the same factory Symphony went in for setting up its own facility, right? So outsourcing is beneficial in certain times. So you have to look at it in a holistic manner. You can't say that one is always better than the other. No, a company which has lack of capital, outsourcing is a good model. A company which is sitting with huge pile of cash, owning the asset may be a better model. So it has to be on a case-to-case basis determined. So one evaluation which needs to be done is the working capital impact. Then there is also risk exposure, other risks which we normally won't consider in rupee and calculation, so we miss this. But that also needs to be considered. There are operational risks like vehicle breakdowns. If there is a accident, the risk is on the company now. Earlier, if there is an accident, the risk is on the transporter, right? So the risk exposure will also have to be considered. And what kind of mitigation cost is there for that risk exposure? That's how you bring it into a cost benefit analysis to be able to compare. Then you also have to look at tax implications. That could be any pure variable thing is a straight deduction in cost. Whereas some types of lease could mean lease can be a deductible expense. Owned vehicle means you can get only depreciation benefit, maybe some loan interest benefit, etc. So it has to be studied as to how the tax implication arises on this. Now, with all that, how do you do a ROI on a project like this, right? What are the net savings and the investment cost? So overall, what is the benefit you're going to get by dividing on the investment cost? That's what will be your ROI. So if I'm going to invest 5 lakhs to buy a vehicle to make this possible, then what is the return savings I'm going to get? Net savings after all the running expenses. That is the return on investment which will be there. Payback period is another way of evaluating it. Is okay, if I have to spend 5 lakhs to implement this solution, how quickly can I earn back that 5 lakhs? So sometimes companies are very particular about this quick realization than better returns, because an asset which is in an asset form is difficult to monetize. So the earlier you get the money back, you are better off. Total cost of ownership is a third method by which you can evaluate. Volume sensitivity analysis, saying, okay, tomorrow if it varies, what will happen? What is the sensitivity? You are taking a decision, fine, no problem. But what you project may not always happen. So what kind of sensitivity will still make it viable when it will become non-viable? So that sensitivity also is very important to look at. One more method of evaluating. Then some key metrics like cost per unit shipped, asset utilization rate. Then you can have service level metrics, various things, etc. as a regular monitoring mechanisms. In doing this whole thing, again, coming back to the theory of what you have read and various things, what are the things? Cost benefit analysis, break-even analysis, which we were talking about, right? You also do a SWOT analysis. What are the strengths of a lease model versus a own model versus a totally outsourced model? What is the weakness? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? So you can do a SWOT analysis. You can do a Porter's value chain analysis. You can do a ROI or NPV, net present value working. So various frameworks can be applied in theory. Actually, these are the ones which are applied to get where it is coming. Maybe it is not written in such language when you go into the corporate world and how they prepare their notes. But essentially, these are the principles which go to drive how they take decisions. So this part I'll skip. It's just some example working. So I'll come to this. The second scenario is looking at strategic cost management, right? So what did we note that Pollachi Hub, it was discovered that vehicles were frequently making multiple trips to the same stockage location, sometimes within a gap of just 2 to 3 days. The fleet comprises older trucks with poor fuel efficiency. This combined with absence of route planning has led to rise in logistics costs, with the average delivery cost reaching 2,500 per metric ton. Management is considering implementing a route clubbing strategy and investing in trip consolidation tools. So today, a lot of these logistics providers provide you a lot of IT tools also. For better planning your trips. So how can FeeCare products focus on core route optimization and trip clustering, right? Which can contribute to strategic cost management. And what are the key cost saving levers in shifting from fragmented trips to a struct dispatch model? So any thoughts on this? One is focus on core route optimization and trip clustering, how it can contribute to strategic cost management. The second is key cost saving levers in shifting from fragmented trips to a structured dispatch model. Any thoughts on this? Please keep posting and we can discuss that. Maybe a minute I will hold for you to put some thoughts on it. Then we can go on to some discussions. Okay, so let's go ahead. And if you have some thoughts, you can keep adding as we go. Yes, I see some comment coming. Shifting of hub to Trichy is very practical suggestion, right? Yes, in fact, they did do something similar to that. Now, here we are focusing more on route optimization and trip clustering, right? What was happening, one of the additional things which was found was that there are making multiple trips the same stockers. There is also poor fuel efficiency and then unplanned routes, right? These were the things which were leading to higher fuel costs, etc. Right? By route optimization and trip clustering, it can reduce fuel consumption by making fewer trips, better planned routes, so that the planning becomes better. It can cut labor and maintenance costs because the less distance the vehicle runs, less wear and tear, obviously less repairs will be there. It will improve fleet utilization because again, you can consolidate dispatches to utilize the capacity better. Then, because of all this, there will be a lower per unit cost of logistics. So how does it align with strategic cost management? Eliminating non-value added activities like redundant trips, idle time, improving operational leverage, right? Fixed cost spread over more metric ton delivered by better utilization of the vehicle. Enhancing scalability. These are the three things which are critical coming up. Increasing the order size with the stockist, right? And the key cost levers, right, is fuel efficiency. So one of the things we saw was that older trucks poor fuel efficiency. So that can be a cost saving lever which can be looked at. How to improve that either by replacing the vehicles or what is required, right? Trip consolidation, again, is a cost saving lever. Fewer trips would mean less amount of costs for the vehicle. Load optimization, more metric tons carried in the same trip, right? Means less cost per metric ton. Yes, usage of IT enabled tools. Somebody has put absolutely. Today there are so many logistics providers who are also giving various such this thing. Somebody has said using smaller sized vehicle with CNG, etc. Actually, instead of saying smaller size, I would say right sizing the vehicle. Sometimes you should use a bigger truck with more in one shot to go, so overall cost is less. Sometimes you should use a smaller truck as a full load instead of a big truck as a part load. So you have to evaluate which is better. So right sizing the vehicle is a right this thing, right? Then the fourth cost saving lever is to reduce fleet downtime. So how you can schedule maintenance, etc., to ensure that the vehicle is not having maximum downtime, it's minimized. Then lowering labor costs by actual utilization being brought down. So these are the cost saving levers which can be looked at in a scenario like this. Of course, somebody has said about specialized services are offered on these lines. Yes, there are logistics providers who are providing these as service today. But the point is, when you are running then they are taking over. Actually, the C&F agents were doing that as a service. That's how normally the business is structured in FMCG. Today, they are using more and more IT enabled tools to support this further. But if they give it to a totally logistics company, they run it only as a logistics. They do not look at the other aspects of marketing, selling, etc., and focused on your clients. They are focused on all distribution together. So in certain places it works well. In certain places it may have other implications which are not covered. So that is why they have a hybrid model always. That, for example, primary freight is always outsourced. From the factory to C&F agent, it's always outsourced. They use large logistics providers or freight transporters to do that, and mostly it will be full truckload. So there is no problem because the checkpoints are very few between you and this thing. But when it comes to local transport, every day the routing might change because today you don't know who all asked for material from you, and your dealers are spread all over. So it has to be dynamic routing and supplies, etc. So the service provider has to be very flexible, and the C&F agent is very flexible because he is doing it exclusively for you. These are the things why it works like a C&F agency. In fact, some of the big models and big things which are more well set, they have moved to a third-party logistics provider where they say, I don't want a C&F agent. I will use a third-party logistics provider. He will warehouse it. He will dispatch it, etc. But there has to be some structured deliveries which are planned. For instance, it works well for companies which are doing pre-planned deliveries. So in those cases, they do it well. Yeah, somebody has raised some very interesting points also. Since the companies into personal care products, instead of product counterfeiting by engaging outsourcing model is there. That is anyway there. That's a risk which will have to be addressed in a different manner. Yes, but that is something they have to always look at. Use linear programming model to optimize the routes. Yes, that's why today there are so many models which are even automated in system. We have moved significantly from the times when other methods were there, but still it points to the need for these. And the frameworks are the same. ABC, total cost of ownership, right? Break-even analysis, value chain analysis, lean logistics. So the frameworks are something which is there. It is only how we implement it today in a IT enabled scenario. It can be much better implemented. That's all. The amount of activity which is happening today, for example, when you order from a quick commerce platform, right? So significant that it could not have been done without IT. So IT has changed the whole scenario to it. Earlier, this could not have been the plan at all. So that is one of the reasons why we need to always rethink, because the whole scenario is also changing. So we need to also consider that and plan. Yeah, so coming to the compliance and governance related matter on the coming from this, right? So we were talking about that the case was found that there were also Telangana-based dealer locations were being still invoiced using the Andhra Pradesh GST registration. This created a mismatch in e-way bill registration and also led to input tax credit reconciliation issues. What are the risks of continuing dispatches without separate state-wise GST registration? And how can PCARE products strengthen its internal compliance? This is what we are going to look at. Already somebody has put better audit of compliance with laws and regulations on a regular basis. That's something which is there. Again, if you look at it, COSO is a very good framework for looking at compliances, governance issues, right? So you have to apply that to PCARE's GST risk. From a governance perspective, first of all, management has to prioritize GST compliance. Now, it is surprising that, it had not been taken as a high priority. Compliance should have been a KPI for the logistics or the finance teams, right? Most importantly, to the logistic team, because they are the ones who are actually implementing it. The finance team may be filing the GST returns and all that, but ownership should be with the logistics team, right? Then doing a risk assessment, which would have identified the GST usage and e-way bills gap. Then having various control activities such as pre-dispatch checks and some kind of automations, right? So if I am sending to certain state, am I using certain registration numbers which have GST, which is only for that state GST? These kind of things can also be automated. Today, if you really look at it, the GST codes are dependent on the state. So all that is already there. So it's how we use that information. Have we ensured that all our databases of client address, etc., have been cleansed up, updated, etc., when especially things like this has happened, where a dealer with multi-locations, after the bifurcation of the state, whether all his accounts have been reviewed to see his address, his GST number, etc., have been properly filled for each of the records. So these kind of things can be looked at. Then information and communication. There has to be some training. There has to be some IT usage, right? There has to be that awareness which is first created. That the moment there has been a change, did actually everyone who is involved in this specifically been sent a note saying that, hey boss, now there are 2 states. Now these are the implications of that. So please look at it. If something like that had gone out, probably somebody would have come back saying that these are the problems we have. So please tell us what is the solution, right? And then regular monitoring. You cannot just leave it. Monitoring is something which has to be there. So these are the COSO components which would have identified or addressed the issue. Knowingly or unknowingly, that is the same thing we use and come up with all these solutions when we do studies like this, right? We may not write like this in a template with COSO components, how it has been addressed, etc. But it is essentially these things which are going in to identify the issues which are brought out. But using a framework and doing it makes it that much more methodical, so you don't miss out something. So what kind of compliance strengthening measures, like I was telling you, distinct GST registrations have been updated or not, then integrate systems to auto-select the GST based on the state, which could have been done. That was not done. Then training. Obviously, that is another thing. And regular health checks. Now we come to some MCQs, post which we will take some free questions from everyone. The first one is PCARE Products Cost Optimization Review Team found that parcel deliveries from the Vijayawada cost 2,200 per metric ton, whereas food truckload deliveries on the same route cost 1,600 per metric ton. The hub dispatches 100 metric ton on this route. So what is the avoidable cost? Someone has put A, right? So like I said, the similar MCQs could come with a little more complex calculations. Please be ready for spending a few minutes to do it, right? Here for convenience, I have kept it simple. After the Andhra-Telangana split, PCARE Products continued dispatching to Telangana-based dealers using their Andhra Pradesh GSTN from Vijayawada. Which of the following best explains the compliance risk? Dual GSTNs are not required for states for the same dealer. ITC claims by Telangana dealers may be denied. E-way bills auto-adjust based on delivery location. Centralized invoicing overrides state-wise segregation. Somebody has said A, somebody has said C. Actually, it is B. The ITC claims by Telangana dealers may be denied because the invoice has been sent in the name of Andhra Pradesh. So it will not even come in that GSTR. Gone. So that might be the problem. Third question, cost management decision. So Pollachi, we saw they were using old trucks which were giving very low fuel efficiency. So for example, take it as 5 km per liter. A proposed shift to a new truck improves the mileage to 8. For a 240 km round trip with 50 liters, what is the savings? Answer is 18 liters, as you can see here. Earlier for 240 kilometers, it would have required 48 liters. Now with 8 kilometer efficiency, it is 30 liters. 18 liters will be the answer here. PCARE Products is exploring a hybrid logistics model with lease trucks for high frequency routes and parcel service for low volume areas. Obviously, low volume, you don't want to send a full truck. The decision primarily reflects a marketing strategy for regional expansion, a backward integration into logistics, right? A cost leadership approach through supply chain solution design, a focus on product innovation. What do you think most clearly explains this? Some say C, some say B, right? It's a cost leadership approach through supply chain design. So we are designing the supply chain to meet with the better cost leadership by having a hybrid model. So route rationalization. Pollachi service dealers in Tanjore, which is closer to Trichy. By shifting the C&F up to Trichy, PCARE Products could save 25 km per trip on 50 trips a month. If diesel costs 90 per liter and trucks average 6 km per liter, how much would be savings? So this is if we move to B, this thing. Somebody has said B, right? So it's essentially 25 km per trip, 50 trips, 1250 km saved. Fuel saved at 6 is around approximately 208 liters. At 90 rupees, around 18,750. So with that, we come to the end of the MCQs here, but we are open for questions now. We can take up questions on any of these things, and uh, my colleague from BOS would be very happy to chip in and probably explain in Hindi. If somebody puts a question in Hindi, I may not be good at that. My sentences are limited when it comes to that. So please feel free to put your questions. We'll try and answer whatever we can here today, and where we can't, we'll come back with the answers.
Thank you, sir, for emphasizing the importance of understanding and approaching IBS case studies effectively. We hope all our students will take this opportunity to delve deeper into the subject and make the most of insights shared. Wishing everyone a fruitful learning experience. Now, I am taking queries. These queries are in chat box. Where can we find the presentation shown by Sir in this session as well as the last session? Student, you can access the BS Knowledge Portal. We have already uploaded PPT of current session as well as previous session. Next query is I am appearing for Group 2. How can I prepare for Group 1 papers, especially for IBS exam? Okay, it's a good question and a common concern among students preparing for final. Here is a smart strategy. Even if you are focusing on Group 2, it's a good idea to pick one or two papers from Group 1 and prepare them thoroughly, especially those that can significantly help you in IBS paper. Okay, financial reporting. This is highly recommended for all students. A strong grip on FR will not only help you score well in IBS but also useful in your professional life after becoming a CA. Second, FR builds the foundation for application of accounting standard and AS related questions that are often embedded in this paper. Advanced financial management. It is ideal for those students who are comfortable with practical problem solving or quantitative analysis. It sharps your decision making skills in capital budgeting, risk management, valuation, forex, auditing, and assurance. A good choice for students who already have good practical exposure through articleship or work experience. Audit related insights are often required in case studies dealing with compliance, risk, and control mechanisms. Self-paced modules. Set corporate and economic laws. Corporate governance is extremely important. Most of case studies involving body corporate can be linked with relevant provisions of the Companies Act. I am repeating, most case studies involving body corporate can be linked with relevant provisions of the Companies Act. If the company is listed, then SEBI LODR regulation become highly relevant too. Set B, strategic cost and performance management. This is core for decision making in IBS. Focus on understanding strategic models such as Porter 5 Forces, McKinsey's 7S, Altman's Z score, value chain analysis, Porter's generic theory, etc. These models may be tested in your examinations. To remember these models, you can frame a mind map. This mind map will be very useful in your examination. Now, I am saying you don't need to study every subject in very detail, but you should have at least basic understanding of all areas. What I am saying, you should have basic understanding of all subjects. Why? Because during the exam you may be able to identify relevant concept and apply the relevant provision to your case scenario or case study. However, this approach is not substitute for best results. Okay, therefore you have to study thoroughly if you get high level marks. Now, this important tip is from my side. Conceptual understanding is very important and it is really a game changer. Okay, this exam is designed to test your conceptual clarity and application skills. Okay, what this exam truly examines, it's about how well you understand the concepts from each subject, apply them in real world scenario, analyze and integrate in multidisciplinary problems. Why? Here it is important to note that here simple search and copy won't work. You may spend too much time trying to find exact section or theory in module, especially when the answer is not word to word. If you don't truly understand the why behind the concept, even if you find the right term or framework, you may end up with applying wrong concept. You might answer one concept by copying text, but there are highly chance of run out of time. What you should do instead, focus on understanding the fundamentals. Use case studies, practice questions. There are empty of resources available on BOS knowledge portal. You can do practice. We have uploaded case studies in case studies section. There are additional case studies hosted in Journal February 2024 edition, January 2025 edition, February 2025 edition. Moreover, there are so many resources. You can do practice. Practice makes you perfect. This exam rewards thinking like a professional, not just a student. When you approach it with a mindset of analysis, strategy, and applied understanding, you will surely stand out. Uh, there is a query from Priyadarshini. Do we get repetitive questions from past question papers or from case study digest? Again, I am saying you should have good conceptual understanding. If you have good conceptual understanding, you can handle any question, any type of question, whether it is simple, whether it is complex, whether it is from case study digest, whether it is from FR module, whether it is from any area, you can easily handle. The key for success is conceptual understanding only. Okay. Now I am guiding you about how to draft answer. Okay. Suppose a question is require you to assess competitive environment. Okay. And it is having worth of 12 marks. Okay. You all are aware to assess competitive environment, you have to apply Porter's 5 forces. And Porter's 5 forces is having 5 major heading. Number 1, bargaining power of buyers. Number 2, bargaining power of suppliers. Number 3, threat of entrants. Number 4, threat of substitutes. Number 5, competitive rivalry. To structure your answer, remember each of the 5 forces you have to answer. Write 2 key points for each heading. Simply divide 12 marks into 5 headings. It will be around 2 to 2.5 marks. Accordingly, you have to give explanation around 2 to 3 points for each heading. But in the end, you have to give a proper conclusion. Only then you can get full marks. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, sir. I'm Smriti Iyer speaking. Sir, the presentations that have been the ones which have been presented by Bala Subramanian sir, how can we get access to it? Because you did say on the portal it is available, but under which dashboard you have to go? Under which tab? Is there any specific? There must be a specific tab for it, right?
Student, you can download the PPT on login to BS Knowledge portal and go to download notes and assignment.
Acha, that is the section. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Students, any other if you have any other query, you may ask. There is there is query from Mitesh. Uh, Thank you, ICAI, for hosting the session. I request ICAI viewers to conduct crash course on important concept. This will help Group 2 students appearing in IBS, especially in subjects relating to Group 1. Okay, I will surely escalate your concern to the relevant authorities. There is query from Ritesh Pal. Please explain the format of how to start answer in case study. Whenever you get any case study in your examination, first of all, read requirement part carefully. When you read requirement part carefully, you will come to know about the level of verb they have asked. Level of verb, there are three types of verbs: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 requires you to use memory skills. Here we normally use verbs like list, identify, state, explain. Okay. Level 2, question requires you to test verbs like calculate, analyze, tabulate. And in level 3 is high level verb. Here they test verbs like evaluate, recommend, advise. What is difference between level 1 verb and level 3 verb? In level 1 verb, you simply write definition or simply use just copy and paste. But in level 3, you have to use your judgmental thinking to reply any answer. Okay. First of all, read requirement part carefully and check which concept you have to apply. Whether you have to apply particular Ind AS, whether you have to apply a particular strategic model, or you have to apply taxation provisions. Then start reading case study. I am saying scan entire case study and make brief notes. Okay, or even you can underline the key points like who are our major stakeholders, what are challenges, okay, what are important dates, what are mission, vision, objectives, okay, and draw a sketch. This sketch or this rough diagram will be very useful. First read requirement part, then start reading case study and draw a sketch from that study, and after that try to understand which model is required, which Ind AS is required to be used. When you frame final answer, this sketch will be very useful. It will give you control over entire case study. Whenever you solve a case study, always start from left side of the page. Why? Because in left side of page you can draw your notes, your sketch, your diagram, which will be very useful while framing your final answer. And it is very important to note, don't forget to give conclusion. Conclusion is very important. Okay. This question is from Nilesh Sharma. Does ICAI always tries to have balance in content of question paper for IBS as per syllabus prescribed? Students, for this query, you may refer past two examinations. Although this is multidisciplinary paper with strategic management, but you may refer past two examination paper and you can analyze weightage, and accordingly you may find the weightage of every subject, even weightage of self-paced modules.
Good evening, sir.
Yes. Good evening.
First of all, sir, really thankful to TV sir and you, sir, for giving such an insightful session to all of us. There were mainly two queries that I was having, sir.
Okay.
First of all, like, sir, if we take into consideration for the FR subject, we all know like how vast the subject is and how much in depth each and every index is there at the final level. So at this point of time, like where we are having DT and IDT as the main papers, would you recommend any of the core chapters that we should be very good and we should be very familiar with for the FR subject? This was the first point. And second, just please, if you could repeat that level 1, level 2, and the level 3, the words that you just said, sir. So we are like, I'm just noting down all the important points in my diary. So that would be helpful, sir.
Okay.
Really, thank you, sir.
Okay. A strong grip on FR will not only help you score well in IBS, but also useful in your professional life. Okay. There is no specific recommendation for any particular INDES, whether this INDES is important or this INDES is not important. Which INDES you ignore, I am sure 100% you will get question from that particular INDES only. If you ignore INDES 41, which is on agriculture, then 100% it is sure then in examination you will get questions from INDES 41 only. That's why I cannot say which INDES you can follow, which you should not follow. Okay. You have to study subject thoroughly. Whether if you want to study FR thoroughly, then go ahead thoroughly. Otherwise, you may opt AFM or audit and assurance. Why I have recommended you to go ahead with FR? Because it will be very useful in future also. Okay. And similarly, if you have good experience, good practical exposure through articleship or work experience, you can also use auditing and assurance also. Regarding your second query, there are three levels: level 1, level 2, level 3. Okay. This is based on skill assessment grade. Okay. Level 1, in level 1, we use verbs like list, identify, state, explain, where you have to use only theoretical knowledge, simply copy and paste. Okay. Level 2. In level 2, the normally verbs are used like calculate, analyze, interpret, tabulate. Okay, here you have to do calculation, then after doing calculation you have to correlate the figures and give analysis. This is level 2. And in level 3 we normally use verbs like evaluate, recommend, advise. Evaluate, for example, what is evaluate? Okay, to evaluate a particular decision you have to give pros, you have to give cons, after that you will give conclusion. And evaluation won't be possible without giving proper pros or cons. You have to give both. Suppose if I decide to go ahead with forward integration, to evaluate this proposal, I have to identify what are positives of this proposal, what are the negatives for this proposal. Only then I can draft my conclusion in my report. In level 3 work, you have to think, you have to go beyond your theoretical knowledge. That's why it is level 3. And decision of level 3 is based on the calculation you have done in level 2. Okay, this is real decision making. There is query from Abhirami. Sir, can I use the past exam multidisciplinary elective question papers for revision? First of all, I recommend you not to use old resources, because old resources are not updated. Yes, students, go to BS Knowledge portal. In case study section, we have uploaded more than 60-70 case studies. Follow all along with your relevant modules. This is sufficient. Okay, and don't proceed with old course case studies. Any other query, students?
Hi, sir. This is
Hi.
Shraddha Desai.
Yes.
So you just told us that the PDF presentation is available in the viewers portal on the assignment section. But under the IBS, I couldn't find any PDF uploaded. Will it be uploaded in the later stage or it is already uploaded?
Student will check it and update it.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Students, any other query? Students, any other query? Okay.
So just to confirm for
Yes.
once and the last, the assignment, like the two students have asked until right now. So whatsoever the PPTs would be uploaded, that would be in the section of IBS itself on the BOS app, right?
Yes.
जो आपका पेपर नंबर 6 है आईबीएस का, उसके अंदर ही एक अलग से सेक्शन आप लोग बना देंगे पीपीटीज के नाम से, आप ये बोल रहे हैं?
यस, उसी के अंदर मिलेगा।
ठीक, थैंक यू सर।
सॉरी सर, मैं अभी ढूंढने की कोशिश कर रहा था। आई वाज ट्राइंग टू फाइंड आउट बट आई एम नॉट एबल टू फाइंड आउट सर एग्जैक्टली वेयर इज दिस लोकेशन। कैन यू सर एक्सप्लेन?
नहीं, वो बता रहे हैं अपलोड करेंगे वो।
नहीं, अपलोडेड है। इफ देयर इज एनी इशू विल रिजॉल्व इट।
सर आई एम नॉट एबल टू फाइंड आउट सर। I was trying in 5 minutes, but I'm not able to find out.
We'll check it in our admin portal and update it.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Maybe it may be some technical issue. We'll resolve it.
Right, sir. Right. Thank you, sir.
Students, any other query? Sir, in paper 2, we need to calculate and based on that conclusion can be used. Can I use that in IBS AFM part? Sure, you can use the methodology you have adopted in your AFM paper, but please, it is important to understand whether that particular decision required financial consideration only or whether it also requires non-financial consideration. Okay, sometimes a particular decision requires non-financial consideration also. In that case, you have to revamp your answer accordingly. For example, if there is a question of international financial management and based on that you have option to move ahead. Okay, based on financial decision you have to option move ahead, but if question says to do proper strategic analysis, then you have to consider non-financial factors also. In that case you have to use pestle analysis. Refer Dormato case study. In Dormato case study, there are two parts. In first part, we have done analysis through international financial management. Okay, we have computed NPV. Okay, in second part, we have done strategic analysis through Pestel. But again, I am saying it depends upon requirement of the question. Unless question says specifically, you should follow the approach adopted by you in AFM paper. Also in FR regarding disclosures, should I need to write practically as given in RTP May 25 or in point wise? Students, here you have to follow the approach as you are following in your respective subjects. If any other query, students? I hope you all have joined our WhatsApp group. If you have any particular issue, you may contact us through WhatsApp group. Okay. As we wrap up today's session, I would like to sincerely thanks our speaker CATV Bala Subramanian sir for sharing his valuable knowledge and experience with us. Sir, your practical insights and clear explanation have really helped students understand how to approach case studies with a strategic mindset. You have inspired us to think beyond just solving questions, to think like a real decision maker. To all our students, thank you for your active participation. Your questions and involvement made the session more interactive and meaningful. We hope today's discussion will help you in your studies and give you more confidence while tackling case studies. This is just the beginning. Keep learning, thinking big. We look forward to seeing you again in our next session on 25th April. Till then, stay connected and take care. All the best and thank you once again.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so
Welcome.
much.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, sir. Bala Subramanian, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you once again, sir. Thank you.